The brief for the Seawing Supernova was to create a fin that presented an all-new level of high performance. That means a fin that could present the flutter kick performance of the Seawing Nova, which is one of the best flutter kick fins on the market, together with the alternate or frog kick performance of the jet fin, which is a market leader for alternate kicks. In order to achieve these goals, we've used many features that have carried over from the Seawing Nova, but we've also added new technologies and new features to boost the performance to an all-new level. One of the features that is carried forward from the Seawing Nova is our clean water blade, and that refers to the gaps or the missing sections of blade between the foot pocket and the blade that allow water to flow through. And we don't have any dead sections of blade that reduces the drag and increases the thrust that that fin produces. Another feature that we've carried over from the Seawing Nova to the Supernova is the pivot control technology, and that refers to the hinge mechanism that allows that blade to bend or flex to the correct angle of attack and then lock in place at that angle. This is not the case with most traditional fins. Traditional paddle fins tend to flex more the harder you kick, which may find you under-flexing on a gentle kick or over-flexing when you kick too hard. Seawing Supernova, on the other hand, will maintain a pretty consistent angle of attack regardless of how hard you kick. This means it's super comfortable and efficient for cruising around the reef, but it also means that when you need to swim really hard into a current or tow a surface marker buoy, you've got the speed and power right on hand. An all-new feature that you'll find on the Seawing Supernova is what we call Auto Adjust Thrust. Auto Adjust Thrust refers to the central panel that can flex independently of the rest of the blade. And the idea with this is that blade can automatically adjust to suit how hard you are kicking. Pivot control technology, which we already spoke about, will attempt to get that blade to around a 45-degree angle of attack, which is generally a really efficient angle of attack. In addition to that, though, what we have is a central panel that after pivot control technology has hit the 45, that central panel allows that fin to deform and actually slightly increase your angle of attack. And you could imagine this similar to an aircraft, which changes the shape of the wing depending on how fast that plane is going. And by modifying that angle of attack on the fly, we keep a fin that is really comfortable for cruising around the reef, as we said, but adjusts or morphs the shape slightly under hard, high-power kicks to give you that little bit extra power and that little bit of extra thrust. One of the features that we pioneered on the Seawing Nova is the winglets on the end of the fins. And that's to combat something called vortex tip loss, which is very prevalent on aeroplane wings. Vortex tip loss refers to the fact that when on a fin, if we speak in terms of a fin, as you kick down, you get a high pressure on this side of the blade and a low pressure on this side of the blade. In an ideal world, you move forward, water flows off the back of the blade, and that low pressure helps pull that blade forward through the water effectively. However, because you have this imbalance of pressure on the two sides of the blade, you get some spillage where that high pressure actually flows around the side of the blade. On an aeroplane wing, you can lose up to 30% of the wingspan effectiveness by having vortex tip loss spilling over from the underside of the wing to the top side of the wing. Exactly the same thing happens on fins, and on the Seawing Nova, those winglets were very effective at preventing that vortex tip loss. You may also see some other brands on the market with deep ribs and deep channels, and all of those will help to achieve the same thing. On the Supernova, we've added a twin tip winglet, and that means that our winglet comes off the top of the blade in the same way that the Seawing Nova did, but it also comes off the back end of the fin for the upstroke. So that twin tip winglet is more effective on your frog kick or alternate kick when you're doing a negative stroke, or even just on the return stroke of a flutter kick. When it came to boosting the alternate and frog kick performance of the Seawing Supernova, we made a couple of important changes from the previous generation fin. The first one involved making a wider gap between the rails that were part of the Seawing fin, and what that did is it changed the proportion of blade between that controlled by the rails and the wingtip that sits outside the rails, and that gives us a far more effective negative portion of the frog kick. In other words, that outward portion, where the Seawing Nova could at times be a little bit awkward on that outward or return stroke, the Supernova cuts through the water with ease and grips exceptionally well on the inward stroke. Another thing that we added to the Seawing Supernova to improve that alternate kick performance is what we call Hydro Loop. And it's an extension of these reinforced rails that actually runs around the trailing edge of that blade on both the top surface and the undersurface. And again, that dramatically improves our lateral rigidity of that fin. Increasing the lateral rigidity dramatically improves the ability for you to scull or move that blade sideways through the water. You'll find a big improvement in frog kicks, sculling kicks, reverse kicks, anything where you're required to move that blade sideways through the water. The Hydro Loop and the wider rail spacing together with the twin tip technology make a massive difference over there. With all of the carryover and new features and technologies that you'll find on the Seawing Supernova, we've created one of the highest performing fins on the planet. Whether it comes to a nice relaxed flutter kick or powering against the current or frog kicking through a cavern, the Seawing Supernova has it all.